The reasons for the rental shortage crisis and the consequent increases in rents can be summarised in two words: state politicians. The policies and actions of state governments across Australia have created the situation where we have too few rental properties in the market. And showing the remarkable capacity of politicians for stupidity, most state governments right now are working very hard on making the situation worse. The state governments in Victoria, in Queensland, Western Australia and elsewhere are all implementing policies which will undoubtedly result in fewer rental properties and therefore lower vacancies and greater upward pressure on rents. Now, it would take hours to itemise all the dumb decisions made by state governments over the past 5 or 6 years, which have created the rental shortage crisis, as well as the new policies which will make matters considerably worse. But to illustrate the situation, let's focus on just one politician who symbolises everything that's wrong with this very broken system: the corrupt, arrogant and thoroughly stupid Premier of Victoria, Daniel Andrews. Well, we'll overlook the whiff of corruption that hangs over Dan Andrews and the arrogant way he dismisses any evidence that he's behaved inappropriately and abused his power, and just focus on what he and his government has done to create the rental crisis in Victoria and the measures currently being contemplated which will turn the crisis into a catastrophe. Over the past 5 years, the Andrews government has implemented changes to tenancy laws which have been highly detrimental to the owners of rental properties in Victoria, including changes which have created substantial extra costs on the owners of properties. And every time the state government of Victoria has done that, investor owners of houses have sold up and got out of the market. And as a result of that, the number of properties available for rental has diminished, and the vacancy rate in Melbourne and elsewhere has dropped to dangerously low levels. Now take a look at the vacancy rate for Melbourne over the past 3 years. In mid-2020, the Melbourne vacancy rate was almost 4%, and a year later, in the middle of 2021, it was still high at 3.5%. Now, when vacancy rates are this high, it's a good market for tenants with plenty of choice and no upward pressure on rents. But another year on, in mid-2022, the vacancy rate for Melbourne had dropped to 1.6%, which was heading towards a serious shortage. And now the city's vacancy rate is just 1.2%. 2 years ago, there were 22,000 properties available for rent in Melbourne. This time last year, there were around 13,000 rental properties available for rent, but now only about 6,000. This means that the number of rental properties in the market in Melbourne is now 1/4 of the number of 2 years ago. So how do you fix that situation? Well, clearly what needs to happen is to bring in measures that encourage investors to buy Melbourne homes and make them available for rental. But Daniel Andrews is doing the opposite. He's implementing policies which will make it infinitely worse for tenants in the state of Victoria. Everything the state government of Victoria is doing is detrimental to the people who supply the product which is in short supply. He has increased taxes on the owners of rental properties. He's planning to punish anyone who uses short-term rental options, and he's planning also to restrict rental increases. So he's significantly increasing the costs of providing the product that's in short supply, but preventing the product providers from lifting the price on the product to compensate for the higher costs. None of these measures addresses the core underlying problem, which is the shortage. Indeed, these measures will make it worse because thousands more will sell up and get the hell out of Victoria, which is rapidly becoming the worst place in Australia to own a rental property.